We live in interesting times. Today's stories. In India, protests continue in Delhi against the citizenship law. The WHO says this is a turning point as the number of male smokers drops. Italy's Conte and UN Secretary General Guterres meet in Rome to discuss Libya and the COP26. Mexico hopes to boost economic growth in 2020. Democrats declare President Trump impeached and call for a fair trial. An expert says it is extremely unlikely President Trump would be convicted in Senate. U.S. envoy to South Sudan warns of further sanctions. Plus, Tampa residents take interest in e-scooters. This is Eagle News coming to you from Las Vegas, bringing you stories from around the globe. I'm Anna Clee. Around 1,500 people continue to protest at the Jamia Millia University in India's New Delhi against a citizenship law seen as divisive and discriminating against Muslims. In other parts of the Indian capital, authorities banned large gatherings. Fresh protests broke out across India on Wednesday as authorities banned large gatherings in parts of the capital in an effort to contain nationwide rallies and riots against a citizenship law seen as discriminating against Muslims. The demonstrations over the past few days have turned violent, with 6 people dead in the northeastern state of Assam and with police firing tear gas and arresting hundreds of people. In the financial capital, Mumbai, hundreds of people under tight security carried placards with the words, "India is ours," and chanted, "We are all one."
We Indian citizens were always very proud of saying that we are safe in India, the Muslims are safe in India. But this act is challenging the same thing. They will be asked to leave their lands, they will be asked to leave whatever they are having over here, and they will be asked to leave. And we don't even know that other countries would accept them or not, or they'll spend the rest of their life in the refugee camps only.
On the basis of religion, caste, creed, no one have to divide us. First of all, we the people of India. It is clearly mentioned in Constitution. So the current regime of a government want to divide us on the basis of religious.
This is a huge protest because it's a matter of our existence now. They are questioning our citizenship, that we belong to this country or not. That's why this is happening, the huge protest right now.
The law allowing New Delhi to grant citizenship to non-Muslim nationals from 3 neighboring countries comes in the wake of other policies from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government that critics said were designed to marginalize Muslims in the Hindu-majority nation. Demonstrators, mostly young people, again gathered outside Delhi's Jamia Millia Islamia University as the ban on gatherings of more than 4 people was imposed in some Muslim-dominated districts of the city. Rallies were also held in other states, including West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, and Telangana. There were sporadic clashes between police and demonstrators in some cities, as well as small counter-protests. The latest round of protests came as the Supreme Court rejected pleas for an immediate stay on the legislation, but deferred the case to January for extensive hearings. Petitioners have said the legislation is unconstitutional and goes against India's cherished secular traditions. Demonstrations tipped to attract huge crowds were planned for Thursday in major cities across the vast nation. The World Health Organization said Thursday the number of male tobacco users is falling for the first time, hailing a major shift in efforts to kick the world's deadly tobacco addiction. The number of women and girls who use tobacco products has been steadily declining for years. But tobacco use among males, who account for the overwhelming majority of smokers, has until now been expanding. In a new report, the UN Health Agency hailed the beginning decline as a powerful indication that anti-smoking campaigns around the globe had begun to pay off. But it warned that far more was needed to kick the addiction, which is estimated to kill some 8 million people each year.
There's very good news. because for the first time in the 20 years that we are measuring tobacco use globally, we see that there's a decline in male tobacco use in 2019. At the moment, globally, we have about 1.3 billion tobacco users worldwide, male and female. So the number of male users have been always increasing. So we've always got more male tobacco users. Now in 2018 that has plateaued, and in 2019 we've seen a decline for the first time. We estimate that by 2020 we will have 2 million less male smokers. So now we see that the measures that we take are working. So that you have policies in place, that you're not smoking in public places, that you're actually increasing taxes, that you're monitoring, and that you're telling people how harmful tobacco use is. That is working. We're seeing the negative impacts of e-cigarettes and vaping around the world. We're currently analyzing this evidence, and we will come up with a report in February.
For the past 2 decades, global tobacco use has been slowly dwindling from 1.397 billion users in 2000 to 1.337 billion in 2018. This means around 60 million fewer people were using tobacco products, even as the global population has swelled. But WHO said reduction has been strongly driven by declines in the number of women and girls using tobacco products, with the number dropping from 346 million in 2000 to 244 million last year. Over the same period, the number of male tobacco users rose by around 40 million from 1.05 billion to 1.093 billion. But men, who today account for more than 80% of all tobacco users, are finally beginning to kick the habit. Thursday's report covers the use of cigarettes, cigars, pipes, water pipes, smokeless products like Kretek, and heated tobacco products, but not electronic cigarettes. It shows that by 2020, the ranks of male users will shrink by 2 million people compared to last year's number, and by 2025, there are projected to be 6 million fewer male tobacco users than in 2018, so around 1.087 billion. WHO attributed the trend to a range of measures enacted around the world, including taxation, banning smoking in public places, and banning marketing of tobacco products. The trend is even more positive when looking at both men and women, with the WHO forecasting that there will be a full 10 million fewer smokers, both sexes combined, next year compared to 2018. And by 2025, that number is expected to shrink by another 27 million, down to 1.299 billion tobacco users worldwide. WHO celebrated that around 60% of countries have seen a decline in tobacco use since 2010. Despite these gains, the UN Health Agency cautioned that progress was moving too slowly and that fewer than a third of countries were on track to meet a global target of slashing tobacco use by 30% by 2025 compared to 2010. Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres give a press conference after meeting in Rome to discuss the organization of the COP26 and the situation in Libya.
A lungo quello dei cambiamenti climatici. Come sapete, l'anno prossimo l'Italia sarà coinvolta nella partnership con il Regno Unito, con la Gran Bretagna, per gestire coordinare i lavori di COP26, e chiaramente in particolare ci siamo impegnati a dedicare un particolare evento ai giovani.
We have lost the battle against climate change, but we will not lose the war. We are determined. And I believe 2020 is a year of make it or break it. And one of the reasons why I believe we can win the war is the fact that Italy, together with UK, will be leading the preparation of the COP26. And so peace in Libya is an absolute must for the peace and stability in large regions of Africa and for the stability in Northern Africa.
Meanwhile, Mexico will announce in the next few days a plan that hopes to boost economic growth in 2020.
Y les vamos a invitar antes de que finalice el año para la presentación de las políticas que vamos a llevar a cabo en el 2020 con el propósito de estimular la actividad económica. Se va a crecer. Ya incluso los pronósticos de calificadoras de los bancos ya están siendo más optimistas.
Up next, Democrats declare Trump impeached and call for a fair trial. An expert says it is extremely unlikely President Trump would be convicted in Senate. U.S. envoy to South Sudan warns of further sanctions. Plus, Tampa residents take interest in e-scooters. Eagle News will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is Eagle News coming to you from Las Vegas. I'm Anna Cui. Following a historic vote in which the House of Representatives voted to impeach U.S. President Donald Trump for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, says, quote, "The question is now whether Senator McConnell will allow a fair trial in the Senate."
The President of the United States has been impeached for now only the third time in history. The President of the United States should be tried. And the question is now whether Senator McConnell will allow a fair trial in the Senate.
He also said, somewhat presciently, when we're dancing with the angels, the question will be, what did you do to make sure we kept our democracy intact? We did all we could, Elijah. We passed the 2 articles of impeachment. The president is impeached.
President Donald Trump was impeached for abuse of power in a historic vote in the House of Representatives on Wednesday, setting up a Senate trial on removing him from office after 3 turbulent years. By a 230 to 197 vote in the Democratic majority House, the 45th U.S. president became just the 3rd occupant of the White House in American history to be impeached. Democrats said they had no choice but to formally charge the 73-year-old Republican, whose impeachment along stark party lines places an indelible stain on his record while driving a spike ever deeper into the U.S. political divide. Adam Schiff, the lawmaker who led the impeachment inquiry ahead of the vote, said, quote, "What is at risk here is the very idea of America." Trump will now stand trial in the Senate, where his Republicans hold a solid majority and are expected to exonerate him. The House vote came 4 months after a whistleblower blew open the scandal of Trump pressuring Ukraine's president to investigate his potential White House challenger in 2020, the veteran Democrat Joe Biden. After a marathon 10-hour debate, lawmakers also voted 229 to 198 to approve the second article of impeachment facing Trump for obstructing the congressional probe into his Ukraine dealings. Trump spent the first part of the day holed up at the White House, tweeting, but on Wednesday night, the president was on friendlier territory. In an extraordinary split-screen moment as the House was casting votes to impeach him, thousands of Trump's most fervent supporters were cheering him at a rally in Michigan, where he railed against a, quote, "radical left" he said was consumed with hatred. Trump said to boos and cheers, quote, "The Democrats are declaring their deep hatred and disdain for the American voter. They've been trying to impeach me from day one. They've been trying to impeach me from before I ran." The crowd chanted back, 4 more years, 4 more years. Despite testimony from 17 officials that Trump leveraged his office for political gain, the president maintained his innocence throughout the impeachment inquiry, denouncing it as, quote, "an attempted coup and an assault on America." Molly Reynolds, a senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution, says it is extremely unlikely that U.S. President Donald Trump would be removed from office after a Senate trial now that the House of Representatives voted to impeach him. But a number of moderate Republican senators may nonetheless demand fairer and more complete proceedings during a trial.
Where 100 senators will hear the case in a trial. That trial is presided over by the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts. Exactly what that trial will look like, we still have some open questions there. So the Senate has some rules for what impeachment trials look like in terms of when it's likely to start. The Senate is supposed to sit for 6 days a week, every afternoon on the trial, whether there will be witnesses, whether they will receive additional evidence beyond what was already presented in the House. Those questions remain to be decided and are likely to be figured out through negotiations between the two party leaders in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who's the Republican leader of Kentucky, and Chuck Schumer, who's the Democratic leader from New York. There are some Republicans who would like to hear from folks like Hunter Biden. There are other Republicans who don't want that kind of a little bit of a circus, maybe you might describe it, on the Senate floor. And so because there is this disagreement among Republicans, I think McConnell is a little bit more interested in just having no witnesses at all, whereas Schumer does have this interest in hearing from these specific witnesses who might have additional information that could change people's minds. There are a couple different groups of folks within the Republican Party who might have an interest in having a fairer and more complete trial. So some of them are Republicans in states that have a lot of Democratic voters who are up for re-election next year. So there we think about folks like Susan Collins of Maine, Cory Gardner of Colorado. And then we'd also think about folks like Mitt Romney of Utah, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who have just more of an institutional orientation towards the Senate and have been willing to push back against President Trump in the past. So it would take 67 senators, so 2/3 of the Senate, to vote in favor of removal. I think that probability of that happening is extremely low. I don't really think anyone expects that there will be that many Republican senators who kind of change their minds, go against what they've said already, and vote for conviction. So then the question becomes, are there 51 senators? That would be a kind of politically consequential number, even though it would have no effect in terms of removing the president from office.
In other news, the U.S. ambassador to South Sudan on Wednesday warned that Washington would not hesitate to slap additional sanctions on spoilers holding back peace in the war-torn African nation. Ambassador Thomas Hushak was recalled in November when South Sudan's rival leaders failed to meet a promised deadline to form a unity government, straining ties with Washington. The United States this week slapped sanctions on 2 South Sudan ministers, accusing them of obstructing a peace accord signed in 2018 that has paused, but not resolved, 5 years of conflict. Hushak stood by the decision, which was criticized by the office of South Sudan President Salva Kiir, and warned of further measures if peace talks fail to advance.
We were deeply disappointed, as you know, by the failure of President Salva Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar to agree on the formulation of a revitalized transitional government of national unity by the established deadline of November 12th. And for that reason, my government called me back to Washington to take part in a reassessment of our relationship with the incumbent government and to discuss what measures we might take to discourage obstruction by all parties towards progress in the peace process, and particularly the establishment of an inclusive unity government. So I call on all the parties to maintain ongoing inclusive dialogue to resolve remaining differences, including a decision on the number and boundaries of states, to honor the commitment to at least 35% representation of women, to commit to protecting humanitarian workers in the country, to release the funds committed for the implementation of the agreement, and to manage these resources in a fully transparent manner. The idea is to isolate leaders or people who have been spoiling the peace process or obstructing the peace process, put pressure on the government to isolate them rather than promote them. Again, this is one tool that we use along with increased engagement. We are looking at ways to deliberately enhance our diplomatic engagements, for instance, throughout the region.
Kiir and his former deputy, Riek Machar, agreed Tuesday to form a power-sharing government before a February deadline. The pledge to join forces is the linchpin of the truce signed by Kiir and Machar, whose falling out in 2013 kicked off fighting that left nearly 400,000 South Sudanese dead. But they have missed two deadlines to do so, most recently in November, when the pair were given another 100 days to come together in a coalition. The U.S., frustrated at repeat delays and having warned of consequences if the men stalled again, recalled Hushak in protest and announced it was reevaluating its relationship with South Sudan. Earlier this month, the U.S. also restricted visas to South Sudanese determined to have undermined the road to peace. Talks between Kiir and Machar, a former rebel leader who lives in exile, have stumbled over disagreements about territorial boundaries in South Sudan and a pledge to unify their fighters in a national army. Successive peace deals and mediation bids have failed to achieve a lasting peace for the world's youngest country, whose independence from Sudan in 2011 was strongly backed by the U.S. The September 2018 ceasefire signed by the warring parties has largely held, delivering the longest period of peace in South Sudan's short history as a nation. United Nations Special Envoy to South Sudan, David Shearer, said Wednesday that delays in the transition to peace had eroded trust and stoked fears that political will between parties is waning. In Florida, Tampa residents take interest in e-scooters, the latest fad in urban transportation. Eagle News correspondent Abby Aragon with the details.
One exciting way to travel the city is by scooter. Here in Tampa, Florida, the latest trends and a fast way to get around the city is by e-scooters. People can be seen riding them down the streets and all over the place. Let's try it out too.
As cities develop and expand, transportation methods must keep up with growing demand. Other forms of transportation commonly used in cities include trains, buses, and rideshare apps. But a way to incorporate a little fun into your morning commute or a stroll through the city is by scooter. Upgraded from the typical scooters we had in our childhood, e-scooters are faster, easily accessible, and environmentally friendly. The e-scooters were implemented to reduce traffic and increase mobility at a lower price. They've also made them super easy to use. All you have to do is download an app for which scooter you're using, then follow the instructions given to you. Tampa residents seem to enjoy the scooters and like to use it for recreational purposes.
Okay, yeah, it was good. It's a good experience. It's not hard at all. It's cheap. It's something to do while you're out here. You should try it. It's pretty fun.
The e-scooters are becoming increasingly popular in Tampa, and unsurprisingly, nearby cities are starting to consider following Tampa's lead, with the scooters being both economically and environmentally friendly.
Now you can ride around your favorite city and see all the best sights. But remember to stay safe. I'm Abby Aragon from Tampa, Florida, and I'm 1 with 25.
Thanks, Abby. That is today's Eagle News. Join us again tomorrow for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I'm Anna Kui, and I am 1 with 25.